وخمار شوي area crossroads.
Hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode of Walking the Crossroads. I want to apologize for my lack of activity the last few weeks. I've been busy with class and also pretty much dealing with the major project that I've been working on. So as a quick update, things are going well. The book has been added up to draft 5 and that's about it. So tonight we're going to be discussing diversity, and a lot of people are probably thinking, oh no, another social justice warrior about to talk about the greatness of diversity. Well, I'm sorry to say this is kind of what you're going to be listening to. So this is going to be another one of my little rambles, but I kind of want to discuss just this idea. Oh, and I forgot to introduce myself. This is Padre Gossi, aka Shadowed Sin, and tonight we're going to talk about how adding diverse characters is a good thing. So before I begin, I want to say that adding diverse characters doesn't necessarily always mean you have to toss in people of different ethnicity or races in your story. It just means people with different points of view, people who come from different walks of life. You know, by having people with different backgrounds, you provide a greater sense of your story. I mean, everybody who writes a decent story knows that if you have a fantasy story with a character who's a mercenary, with you already got a diverse story. Why not take it a step further and take it out of the traditional notion of everybody in the story has to be of a given race, of a given gender? Why not have more women in your story? Why not have more gay men in your story? Just think about it. It's not something you have to do. You don't have to have a non-binary person, but it allows you to add newer dynamics. I mean, I once heard someone during the London Book Fair say that by removing a gay man from their story, they opened up relationship possibilities. Well, I would say the exact opposite. By having a gay person in the story, you add up even more possibility. You don't have to always have romantic relationships in the storyline. I think if you drive your story on that notion alone, you're kind of being a little cheap in a way. So let's talk a bit about this tonight. So when you build your story, it's a good idea to think about the kind of people that live in the world and what kind of world you're creating. Well, it would also be a good idea to decide, are you going to give a viewpoint from the different groups in your world? If your story is about, medical technicians, are you going to include anyone from different parts of, is it based in a hospital? If so, you're going to include people from the trauma ward, from, emergency. Are you going to have surgeons talking versus pathologists? Because all these people are going to have a different point of view in medicine. The same can be said for if your story is about war and you're doing, people who are a unit. I mean, if you do, let's say, kind of a Halo-esque story, you have different colonists and different, walks of life in the background. You could have people who are super soldiers versus people who are, from this agrarian colony, from this classist colony, or even, space marine brothers. I mean, the thing about this is the different backstories and different points you add to your character provide a greater ability for you to tell a story. Now, at the same time, you shouldn't add all this just for the sake of it. Otherwise, you're just going to overexpand and everything's going to get silly. But think about how, recent stories, or even recent movies such as Big Hero 6 or Star Wars The Force Awakens have really opened up a lot of opportunities. One reason for a lot of people to push for diversity is that at the end of the day, we have plenty of stories about white guys saving the world. In fact, we're getting even more stories about white girls saving the world. We need a few people that aren't necessarily men or women saving the world who are maybe European descent or Caucasian, but let's expand it a bit here. The point about this is that it's not about taking power away from people who are, Caucasian, European, or anything. The point of the matter is by adding more storytelling and more different POV, more different interpretations, we really give people a chance to explore. I mean, anyone who sat down and seen some of the crazy stuff that anime comes out with, like reinterpretations of classical stories. I mean, I started watching the Count of Monte Cristo they created, and it's like a space featurette. So kind of these reinterpretations we often seen by different things we've reinterpreted Shakespeare with pop music. So, or Romeo must die. I mean, we had a storyline of Romeo and Juliet-esque storyline with, I believe, with Jet Li, and then Gabrielle Union, possibly. No, that's wrong actress. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that stories can be redone, the different points of view can be redone, and it doesn't really change the narrative. It just provides a different take on the narrative. And by having more, thought to what these characters are, we're providing a greater depth. Plus, it's been shown that with the greater amount of positive role models that people to see that are like them, they feel better about themselves. I mean, look at the amount of, positive role models out there that are in a wheelchair. Okay, can you name a few people? Cool. If you said, Dr. X, way to go. You got Professor Xavier, the kid from Glee. To note, all the actors that played them actually weren't disabled. So it would be even cooler if they did that, because it's kind of an empowering concept. It's not something to obsess over, but it's kind of like how some autistic children felt about Drax the Destroyer from Guardians. His inability to understand metaphors allowed children to go, oh, it's someone like me. It's this concept that basically allows people to feel more empowered. Now, a few people are probably going to say, we're doing this just for the sake of pandering. Well, one, if I was pandering in my current story, I'd be a lot more blatant about it. Honestly, I wrote a story about a trans character because I'm genderqueer, and also because why not? I wanted to write that story. It has nothing to do with pandering. I would be a lot more shilling if I was pandering. But I think in a lot of ways, the point of diversity is that we want to increase. It's not about taking away, which seems to be the biggest complaint I've often seen. It's this idea that we're being politically correct, that we're trying to shove politics down people's throat. Well, one, no one is forcing people to read these stories. I mean, for the love of God, last weekend I read a story that was pretty much blatant gender abuse shit, and I had to put it down several times because I'm like, this is just bad. But I read it because it's part of a series I'm reading, and I stuck it through, but at the same time I was still putting the damn thing down going, people write this stuff. I didn't have to read this. I still did. I mean, I didn't have to read the Barsoom novels and their wonderful misogynistic obsession with saving the princess, but I still did. So if people are willing to read this stuff, and this is some of the stuff like Barsoom, which was by Edgar Rice Burroughs, that's been around for a while. That's a staple of modern fantasy and sci-fi. In fact, the John Carter Mars, aka the Barsoom novels, are a cornerstone of what's called space romance, which created space opera. So when people complain about such and such being shoved down their throat, I have to laugh, because I've had to have, a lot of this stuff shoved down my throat. I grew up in, a society that for a while was fairly conservative. So especially when the conservative leader controlled my church, I had to get all that rhetoric. So, maybe when less of that stuff gets shoved at me, I'll actually agree with them. But at the end of the day, no one honestly is losing anything if we have Kamala Khan as Miss Marvel. In fact, by having the narrative of a young Pakistani Muslim, all we're doing is enriching the experience, because not only does that reach out to more readers, it connects the people more, and also makes Marvel a lot more open. I mean, one great thing about the mutants in X-Men was their ability to help people understand racism and understand prejudice. By writing these different stories, not only are we getting people to understand different points of view, we're getting them to maybe even feel something for people who aren't who they are. So at the end of the day, I'm just going to point and say, Force Awakens is one of the highest grossing films of all time. It has a woman as the main character. It has a black guy as a secondary character. And Poe Dameron and Finn are possibly a thing. If not, doesn't matter. It's already a context thing. And Big Hero 6 is one of the most beloved movies of all time that I've noticed, especially with Baymax. I mean, it also had an incredibly, diverse cast. Main character's Asian. We have, at least one other, Asian character. We have a black character. We have several different characters who are Caucasian. And we have and we also have a Latina in Honey Lemon. So And the point here is we're not kind of like checking off anything. It's a plus. You know, these different characters add, right? They provide things. It's kind of like one thing that was always so cool about Star Trek was no matter what the characters look like, no matter the fact that we have a woman as the captain, a black guy as the commander, or a robot or a Klingon, the characters at the end of the time were able to deliver their awesome just because of who they are. And I think in a lot of ways that's something we need to move towards. But right now, post gender, post race doesn't exist yet. I mean, I'm not even going to even point to the Trump wall, and I'm just going to let people think about that. But at the end of the day, diversity allows us to apply and create more interesting stories. When I first started writing the latest one, the Threefold Serious, it really got me thinking because I wanted to create a world that had no Caucasian influences. I didn't want it to be European. I mean, I've even done my best to avoid anything remotely Indo-European, and the point about that was, I'm really trying to avoid a bunch of cultural trends which are found throughout Indo-European languages or culture. And if Indo-European, for those of you people, that's anything that's remotely parts of India, specifically languages related to Hindi, Sanskrit, Persian language, Iranian and other Persian languages, anything that is found up into Norse. The whole point about this was I wanted to delve into an entire section, specifically Polynesia, Austronesia, Australia, Papua New Guinea, and even parts of China and Japan. Now, China and Japan in my books are kind of more of a storyline kind of influence the characters, and most of the languages come from like Hawaii and parts of Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. But the point here was to really delve into the concepts of, okay, one, we have a world where everybody is pretty much, tan, at least, so there's no really pale people here. If so, how does that play into things? So a lot of the stuff I built into, I thought about it. I thought about the dichotomy, of things. And one thing I came up with is, why would color of skin really matter? And, well, it's an often thing we do, but racism is very different for each culture. So I came up with the idea that people don't trust light-skinned individuals in this world because when you die, your skin loses its power, you become pale, and so to them, lighter skin is associated with death, which is unclean, and so that's one reason why there's kind of this prejudice that exists. It's an example of how in Indo-European influenced languages there's often this concept that light is good, dark is bad, or right hand is good, left hand is bad. That is actually a thing. I mean, if you go back far enough in Christian mythology or anyone, you would have people who are left-handed be called the devil's minions. That actually wasn't just a joke from American Dad people. It actually was a belief. It's not just the idea of the wiping hand. There's actually an entire cultural aspect to that. So it's this idea of not only telling a different point of view, but was also exploring how diversity can exist in a world that otherwise, if I had not taken my time, would have just come off as a one pat. I mean, one thing we often don't see when it comes to some of these made-up worlds is that actually the diversity tends to only exist in, different hair colors or different, maybe languages, but doesn't always take on a level of consideration. So one, if you do, a pseudo something world, what is the reason that they don't get along? Why do they have prejudice? Why don't they have prejudice? So think about all these things. So at the end, what we're talking about here is the idea that not only introducing new concepts, but by playing with them allows us to tell stories that normally would not necessarily would not be told, but also allows us to explore, different cultures, which allows us to do different dynamics. I mean, imagine if you lived in a culture where murder isn't necessarily a bad thing. Well, how do you shape that morality? I mean, if you do, let's say someone decided to write a story about Shaka Zulu, okay, and how do you write a story about a man who was, in all intents and purposes, a megalomaniac, but also brought a lot of greatness to his people? So could you write that? Could you write a story about Genghis Khan, about Kutalun, the wrestling princess of the Mongols? How can you do these different stories and at the same time, give them the same kind of life and breadth that anyone else could? So there's a lot of potential stories out there, and we're getting even more. I mean, we have a story series now about a ship that is sentient, that gets locked in a body, that then goes up against an emperor whose own mental status of having too many bodies has caused a civil war with himself. That screams sci-fi awesome on so many levels. And some people have complained about that book series, the Ancillary Justice series, as being too political because of the ship's lack of gender. People seriously cared about that. They cared about it enough to complain and drop down and actually make a tirade about it and actually make an issue about it at the Hugo Awards. So honestly, I just don't understand this vitriol, and I understand that some people think that their concepts being the story, but where I see diversity, all I see is good things. All I see is, a discussion. Now, yes, there are people who are SJWs who use this as a means to bully other people, but I would point to the people who complain about that, saying, well, by then attacking people with a different point of view, you're just propagating the bullying. So, in essence, let's just not bully people. Let's go that way, Let's not complain. Let's let people do what they want. Let's enjoy the stories we want. If you don't want to read a story about a given character, then just don't read it. Don't give it your money. Read the stories you like. But at the same time, don't disparage people, because all people were doing and all I'm doing as a writer is I'm just, I'm challenging myself. I may not write a decent book, but at least I went out there and I challenged, and I went out my comfort zone. I took time to research it, I wrote a book where a person changes gender. I wrote a book where a girl has to deal with the fact that her racial status isn't easily recognizable to a lot of people. I mean, I plan on writing a book, a buddy cop story, with the main characters being completely platonic and playing around with their different relationships and stuff like that. And I'm still not even sure where it's going to be set, but it's going to be possibly cyberpunk? Who knows? So anyway, guys, thank you for listening to another ramble. Have a good time. Enjoy this week, and I'll try to get another episode out in the coming weeks if possible. Anyway, bye. As the Amazons say, the hen shush.